Hi everyone, my name is Winnie and I'm here taking the Intro to React Part 2 workshop for Open Dev. Let's jump right in. So we saw in Part 1 that we know how to now create a React app, and we also now know how to create a simple website with that, as well as using some things called hooks like use state and use effect. Now we want to talk about how to create the app to be a bit more scalable and contain a lot of things so that when it becomes bigger, it's still easier to manage. And so to do that, one thing we consider is the idea of components and passing in the props to a component. And so let's look at the screen here to see this demo website kind of laid out. And let's try and see the little parts that kind of make up this website. I can see there's this button, this kind of enlarged search bar area, as well as these cards down near the bottom. And so these are the small things that kind of make up the app, and we can call these components. So once these small components come together, they can create a really complex thing. But the idea is that if we're able to section it off into components, we're able to work on one thing at a time, and then we can bring them together. Another really good thing about them is that they're reusable. So if we were to create a card app here, a card component, here, we can reuse it for this card and so on. So it's like creating helper functions to reuse your code. And sometimes you might want to create these cards to be a little bit different, in which case you can pass in these props to the components to distinguish them. And we'll see how to do that a bit later. So something that you might want to do is have this card have one title and this card have another title, but still have the structure the same. This is where you would use components as well as passing in specific props for each card. So each component really should be seen as an independent piece of the UI. So let's see how to kind of code this up. If we look on the left, we have the code for the app as a whole that we saw previously. And we can see that it returns a div that returns these two things. And these two things are actually components. So if you were to create a component, you would then call it in the app like this. So if I created a counter component, I would call it in the app by its name and surround it with these angled brackets. On the right here is an example of an actual component. So we can see that these are components on the left here, but we don't have the code for how this component is made. What actually happened is, earlier in the file, we've imported these components from different files. So all the source code for these components are actually in a different file, and we like to keep it that way to have a bit more organization. And let's say this is another file called greetings.jsx, and this contains the greetings component. We can see that a component is written up kind of like a function. We have arguments, and then we have something that we return. In this case, we return a div with a message. These arguments are we call them props, and we'll see how we pass in these props. But from here, we're going to take the message that was passed in and display it as a greeting. And that's pretty much what counter or capital finder might look like. Instead of const greeting, it would be const capital finder or counter and be written in a similar way. One thing to note is that a component that you've made, you can have this big, element, but also have children elements or even children components inside of it. And one thing to note is that if this parent component that has children elements, children components re-renders, if the parent re-renders, then all the children also re-render. So, as I kind of mentioned before, this is the kind of file structure that will occur if we do use components. And this is, I guess, the way that people usually go about it. So we have the app.js, which has all the app's needs and everything that we want for the app and as a whole. And then we have a folder called components, where we have the two components that we saw earlier, capital finder and counter. And they're named with capitals at the beginning and just the component name. Cool. And now we'll come into the idea of props. So we can see that we have components, and to call them, we call them like this. So what this means is we had the bracket, the component name, and then the closing. So if we go back a bit, we saw that here. But as we saw just then, they also have a little, what's that called? Attribute almost. Here, name equals Sarah or Sarah. And these are what we call props. So in the I guess place where we're calling the component, this is how we call the component, and we pass in the properties into the component. And so when we're in the component file, like welcome.jsx, we can find these properties from name equals Sarah. And so we go props.name, which will equal to Sarah because name corresponds to Sarah. Awesome. And you can also use a different kind of syntax to take it out and to make it less messy if you don't like to prefix everything with props dot and so on. So what we have here at the top is taking the props or properties from when the component was called, and then we grab the message and the emoji. The way to use it where we just use the message and emoji as variables themselves is destructuring, where we know it'll be like a dictionary structure, so we could add these dictionary I guess symbols, and then we give names to the I guess keys that are in the dictionary. So we have the message and the emoji, and then it'll bring it out into variables called message and emoji. So we don't need to do prop stop. Cool. So let's do a little demo. So just before starting, I just created a new React app using the create React app command line. So that should be npx create React app. And so let me open this up here and let me zoom in. So pretty much I've just opened my app, and these are all the folders, and I've jumped into app.js. And let me open my terminal, and let's kind of start it to see what that looks like. So as that loads, just give it a moment. Perfect. So here, this should still be the bare bones of what the app looks like. So just this at the beginning. And let's just delete some stuff to make it a bit easier. So let's just make it empty, and let's just test that works by saying hi. And let's reload that. There we go. So we have hi at the top. Let's add some breaks in so that it's just a bit easier to see. Nice. So now we have this simple thing. And so let's just say we want to add a button, perhaps. So I'm gonna create a button. And let's call it like click here. And let's now give it some, I guess, style. So to do that, we do style, or to do it inline, I guess, we can do style like this. And so let's say the width is 200 pixels, maybe. And the background is blue. Cool. And let me make another one called, let's say, oh, having it red. And let's call this don't click. Now let's see what that looks like. Oh, awesome. So yeah, so we have a click here and don't click. Cool. So now we have these two buttons and they're quite similar. So maybe let's try and make these buttons as components. So what I want to do then is create a new folder actually called components. And let's add a file button.jsx. Cool. And so I want to maybe import React from React to allow myself to make the button item. And then I'm going to set it up like we saw in the slides, which was set it up like a function. So that's like const button equals. We'll leave that for now. Cool. And then to be able to actually export or return that button item out, we want to write export default button. And so in this case, we only want to export the button and we only want one thing in each component, so we call it default. But if we had many items, we won't say this default, we would say export here. Or actually, no, yes. Okay, so one other thing we can do, as we saw, was add props, which is the properties if we would want. And let's just return something kind of simple, which is just a div saying hi again. Awesome. So now we've got that button. Let's comment these out first. And then let's try and see if we can import our component. There we go. So it takes it from the folder components, which is where it is, and button. And now let me kind of call the button. Awesome. So we also don't need logo anymore. But let's jump on. Yep, awesome. So we've actually got the button component showing up, which is really good. So yeah, so originally it was the two buttons, but now we've imported button, which is the hi component. Awesome. So now let's actually make a button. So let me take this commented code over. And you can see how we want two buttons, right? We wanted the red button and the blue button. So I'm going to make it two buttons here. And that just makes this app so much simpler looking. You just have button and button. And we know that most of the code is repeated anyway. So that's really good that we have components. Oh. Cool. So I'm just going to paste this here for now. and let's see what we want to do. Let's kind of base the click me button first. So let's say we want to just see the blue button, the click here button. Oh, we have some bad syntax. Okay, let's see. Okay, let me just fix up the syntax, or let me try and rewrite it again. Okay, so instead of this, we want to grab a button. That's not right. This should work. Let's see if this is just my linter going a bit weird. I want it to say hi. Okay, so it does work to say hi, hi. I'm not too sure what the exact error is. Maybe I didn't import something correctly. That's okay. React from React, const button, and then export default. Can't seem to figure out what might be the issue, but we'll push on because it does seem to be working. So now we want to add the styles. So let's say we wanted the width to be this much and the background to be blue. So we definitely want the width to be same between the two buttons, right? But we want the background to be different depending on what it is. And what we realize is that we can pass that in as props. So let's pretend we're going to pass in a props dot background color, or props.bg for background. And let's just go back to here and let's say bg equals blue. Cool. And then we're going to and then we wanted the other one to be red. So now we've tackled the style. And then let's see, we kind of also want the message as well, right? So what this means is we kind of want to do message equals click me, and then another message to be don't click me or something. I have to use double quotes because it interferes with the single quotes. Cool. And then so instead of hi, we'll do the message. Now let's see if that works. Is the issue. That's okay. I'm going to delete this. Oh, okay. It was just, okay. So I think you can't, it's confusing because this part they expect something, yes, that is like maybe not JavaScript-y or something else, or like HTML-y, but you should only be able to use this thing in here to insert JavaScript. And so that's what that's used for. And when you're returning something, you should only be able to return one thing. And so they thought probably that I was returning some other thing up here. But yeah, you should only be able to return one thing. So that makes sense. Okay, so hopefully that works now. Ah, awesome. Oh, props.message. That's where yes, I made a mistake. So like I said, we want to inject JavaScript here, right? So let's put that in brackets because we want to get the props message, not actually print out the words props.message. Cool, click me and don't click me. Awesome. And we can even pass in functions as well. So you can pass in these just normal variables, but you know that you can also pass in functions. So let's say we want to pass in the onClick function, which is pretty much, oh, actually, I need to use this because JavaScript, onClick, which pretty much is a function where you can maybe create an alert called yay, because they clicked you. And then for this one, you can say onClick is creating an alert called no. Cool. And so now we can do the same thing here. So it's not a style, it's an actual property. And so the onClick will equal to in brackets props.onClick. Perfect. And oh, trailing new line, and let's see if that works as well. So, oh, awesome. So it says yay, and then no. Cool. So yeah, so you can even customize it even more and even more. And like something like you can force them all to have curved edges. And so you just like can like repeat the kind of structural element of it as a component. And then you can customize it even though they're components of the same thing. You can even customize it even more. And that's where props comes in. Cool. I hope that makes sense. And yeah, let us know if there's any questions. And I think there's one more slide where you can kind of look at props.children. And so what this means is that you saw in here that it's this one. It's kind of like a button tag and then a button tag and then a this thing, right? Well, sometimes we don't want to pass in the message through props, or not through props, but we don't want to pass in the message like an attribute. Maybe we want to, for example, be like button. And then we want to say click me. And then maybe we want to do the same for this button as well. So these are just different ways you can go about it. Oh, they did that for me. Cool. And then you can say, no, don't click me. That's what it was. So now instead of it being props.message, it's actually props.children because yeah, that section in between is I guess the children part of it, but it's not only just children. Let me just check the slides again. It's .children and then I think, no, actually it is .children. But yes, so it should be .children. And so let me just confirm the view through here. And yeah, and it's still the same. So that's another way where you can pass in the properties as well. If you do want to use the element, like adding something like the text in between two tags, like you do in like p tags. Cool. I think that's all for this section. Have a little break and we'll come back with the next section.